Talking about Sam, aren't we? We've been talking about these big figures of the Bible, the ones that we put on the pedestal, the ones that because we put on the pedestal, we think we can never be like them, never have their faith, never love God as much as they do. And so we tend to just automatically cut ourselves off from the story and figure they were better than us. So what we've been doing is going to the Old Testament, looking at those major individuals and pulling them down from the pedestal and getting into the text to show ourselves their humanness so that we can feel that their story is really our story, because indeed their story is our story. Now last week I had to do part one, because I got too long-winded, and we looked at the story of Samson. And we looked at how at his birth he was set aside to be a Nazirite, which means he was not allowed to cut his hair, never allowed to touch liquor, and set aside to be a specially chosen servant of God. But we noticed how, in that story, he didn't do very much with the gift he was given. He didn't do much to reflect God's love. And maybe he was even a little bit spoiled. He was the jock in high school. That's what Sam was, the jock. How many of you knew the jocks in high school? Yeah. How many of you were a jock in high school? Yeah, right. The only thing I knew about the jocks in high school was that I wasn't one. And that my best friend wasn't one. And that the jocks got all the good-looking dates. And we all wished them well. Yeah. Samson, his gift was legendary strength. And we love to read his story, don't we? But he's a tragic figure. Chosen to be a special servant of God, and in the text, you see doggone little of anything he did to honor God. It's right to the point of almost being selfish. Telling his mom and dad, I saw a beautiful woman, and I'm attracted to her, go get her for me. And they saying as good parents, oy vey, can't you get somebody from your own people? This is somebody from the people we don't like. I want her. He marries her. Has a snit fit. Leaves her. Comes back later when he calms down. Men don't behave like that, do they? Men don't behave like that. Comes back later, and her dad says, we thought you walked out on her completely. I gave her to the best man in the wedding. So he gets upset and ties the tails of, 300 or 400 foxes together, lights them on fire, has them run through their fields and burn up all their crops. Their response is to go to Samson's father-in-law and the woman that he had married, and they burn them alive in the house. Isn't the Bible full of wonderful stories? Touching, loving, forgiveful stories? Well, the story continues with Sam. Quite the guy, isn't he? Because when they finally come to kill him, it says, remember that he picks up a fresh jawbone of a donkey and then ruins the day for about 1,000 Philistines, it says? Well, it gets better. By the way, once he killed all those people, he was tired and thirsty. Remember how it said there's nothing to drink. Am I going to die of thirst after all of this? And God had to give him water. Kind of a crybaby, too. I don't know. Well, anyway, here we go, folks. It's in the Bible. Don't get after me if you don't like the language. Once Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute and went into her. That's not what a man of God is supposed to be doing, folks. We're supposed to stay away from houses of negotiable affection. Okay? He goes on in. The Gazites were told, Samson has come here, so they circled around and wait for him all night by the city gate. They're going to get him now. He'll be tired out after spending the night with her. They kept quiet all night, thinking, let us wait until the light of the morning, then we'll kill him. But he only lay there till midnight, got up, took hold of the doors of the city gate, ripped them off, and carried them away. Now remember, the city gate was important. You closed those when the enemy was coming. You ever got city gates, you're vulnerable to any enemy that comes by with their army. He takes the gates off, carries them up several miles away, and disposes of them. They had to make an impression. And his story jumps. You ever notice that? Just jumps from one event to the next. We don't know what happened after he got rid of those gates. We don't know the response. It goes right into another story. After this, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. Delilah. Last week I told you what Delilah means, didn't I? It means what? Flirt. It means flirt. So in other words, this jock fell in love with yet another cheerleader. He fell in love with Delilah, and she's a Philistine. She's not a Hebrew. So that, this guy's just doing what he wants, taking what he wants, and the lords of the Philistines came to her and they said, find out, coax him, find out where he gets his great strength so that we can conquer him. So he goes to visit her, and you can just picture it. He's laying there with his head in her lap, and she's feeding him grapes one at a time. She's probably peeling them for him. That's how guys get. And she's saying, oh, honey, why are you're so strong? Feel those muscles. What makes you so strong? And he knows he's not supposed to mess with that long hair. That's the symbol of God's gift to him. He was given the gift of strength. And if he cut his hair, he'd lose his strength. So he tells her, well, if you tie me up with 12 brand new bowstrings, I'll lose my strength. And then he falls asleep. So she ties him up with 12 new bowstrings. Now how he slept through that, I don't know. Okay, but she tied him up. Then they were ready to pounce on him, and she cries out, Samson, the enemy's upon you! And he jumps up and breaks all those bowstrings, and you can just see all the Philistines coming in to get him, going, whoa, out they go. Then he comes and visits her again, and she says, you didn't tell me the truth. Don't you love me? If you loved me, you'd tell me the truth. Jeffrey, don't fall for that. Remember this story and don't fall for that. Women have a way of getting information out of men, don't they? Raise that eyebrow, bat those eyes, tell you how handsome you are. That's what's going on with Samson. You didn't tell me the truth. If you loved me, oh, there's the one. That's the one that gets a guy every time. If you loved me, you tell me. So he says, tie me up with so many new ropes, and I won't be able to break out of that. I'll just be captive to whoever. So he falls asleep, and she ties him up with new ropes. Talk about a guy. Did they have sleeping pills then or something? This guy's just out. She ties him up with these new ropes. And it says that she cries out, all the men come in. They're getting ready to pounce on him, and she cries out, the lords of the Philistines are upon you! And he jumps up and he just snaps them. And they take off running again. Wow. Well, third time's the charm. He goes back to see her again. Can you imagine anybody being in love with this woman? She must have been a looker. Okay? And it says here, he's laying there with her, and she says, Delilah says to Samson, until now you've mocked me. If you loved me, you wouldn't mock me. Until now you've mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you could be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head into a web and make it tight with a pin, then I'll be weak. And so while he slept, she gave him a new hairdo. She's thinking the third time's the charm here. She weaves his hair and puts a nice pin in there and everything. And then she cries out, the Philistines are upon you. He wakes up, pulls out the pin, the hair falls down, and he proceeds to beat the living bejeebers out of people again. So it's not over. All right. Now, then she says to him, next time he visits. How can you say you love me when your heart is not with me? How many guys have ever heard that? How can you say you love me? You don't take me anywhere. You don't spend money on me. You don't, whatever. Okay? How many of you women are going to be looking for me after this? It's in here, okay? I'm just making it come to life with a little color. All right? How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You've mocked me 3 times now, and you haven't told me what makes your strength so great. Finally, and these are the words in Scripture. I love this. Boy, I love this. Don't get mad at me. Finally, after she had nagged him with her words day after day and pestered him, he was tired to death. Wow. Does this sound like some relationships you might know? So he told her his whole secret and said, a razor has never come upon my head, for I've been a Nazirite to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, then my strength would leave me, and I'd become weak like everybody else. So while he sleeps, what does she do? She gives the poor old boy a buzz cut. Hair's gone. Philistines come in, wake up there upon you. He jumps up to fight. He has no strength. They capture him. Okay? Now, the moral of the story, guys, is not that it's okay to lie to your wives. Okay? But they capture him, and what do they do to him as soon as they capture him? They gouge out his eyes. Can you imagine that? They gouge out his eyes. They blind him cruelly, horribly. And then they take him down to a grist mill that he has to just go round and round all the time in total darkness, grinding grain for the enemy to eat. That's his lot in life. Now, I told you the story just all of a sudden jumps. It does it again. Because the next verse says, but his hair began to grow unnoticed. Folks, if you were a Philistine and you saw all that he had done, and you cut his hair and made him a slave, wouldn't you be checking to see if he was growing that back? They didn't. He grew it back. And then they had this great big festival where they were worshiping their God in this big, almost like a Colosseum temple area. And they brought, and while they're worshiping their gods, their false gods, and having fun and doing all the festival things that they did back then, they say, hey, let's bring Samson out here. He was the tough guy of the Hebrews. Let's bring him out here and let's put him on display so that we can mock him and have a little more fun. Isn't that what you ought to do with your enemy? Mock them? Have fun with them? Gouge out their eyes? You know, when we read these stories, when we hear these stories, we can take so many of those events and just pull them up out of the text and plop them into today if we just take time to do it, can't we? So they bring him out, put him on display, everybody mocks him, and he asks a little kid there, he says, guide me over to a couple of the pillars of the temple so that I may rest my hands upon them. And they guide him over and they put one hand on this pillar, and he puts one hand on that pillar, and then he says a prayer to God, give me strength to destroy my enemies. And he starts to push. You remember that 1948 movie with Victor Mature playing Samson, standing there, back muscles bulging, pushing on those pillars. And he commits suicide by pushing those pillars down, and the whole temple collapses and kills everybody inside it. And the story comes to an end. Isn't he one of the most tragic figures you've ever read about in the Bible? To be set aside at birth to represent the goodness of God and go your own way. To be given a gift, a spiritual gift from God. His was the gift of great strength. To be given a gift from God and not using it for God's purposes. Isn't that tragic? Until eventually that gift he was given causes his own destruction. Was he killing all those people to please God, or was he killing all those people for revenge? Was he killing all those people because he just wanted to take them with him because he didn't want to live anymore? We don't know, do we? We want to jump towards the thing that makes us feel the best. But he did it for God. But if you read the whole story about Samson and his life, you see a person who was given a terrific gift from God and didn't use it for the purposes of God. And it became very tragic for him. Wouldn't it be a waste if somebody gave you a gift? A gift that could touch so many other lives? Who amongst us has never dreamed of good old Uncle Charlie dying and giving us $10 million? Yeah, we all do, don't we? We all wonder what we would do if we were suddenly rich, and all the wonderful, nice things we would do for others, and how we would support the church and do this and do that. But when it comes right down to it, we all have already been given a gift from God. The Apostle Paul even tells us that. Every single one of us have been given a gift from God. We are to interpret what that gift is and use it for the glory of God. That's where Samson fell short. And at least part of the story, there's many ways we can interpret these stories, folks. This is just one of them. That's what I love about the Bible. These stories can apply to our situations in life incredibly. But what if we take the gift God has given us, we don't use it? What happens to it? It can come back and destroy us. We destroy ourselves, don't we? Because when we don't use whatever that gift is that God has given us, we start pulling away, moving away from God. Even if we understand what that gift is, like Samson did, maybe we'll tend to use it for our own benefit. And that becomes self-destructive. What is your gift? Have you ever thought about it? What gift has God given you to be used for His glory? How are you going to use it? There is no part 3. Let us pray. Help us, oh God, to identify what it is you've given us. Help us to seek it out in Scripture through the words of Paul. Let us look into his letter in Corinthians. Read through those lists of gifts. Help us to help others identify their gift. And then together as the body of the Christ himself, the church, help us to have the courage to use those gifts, not for our own sake, but for His. But we pray even in His name. Amen. Closing.